Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Slack, and today I will be presenting my summer research entitled Exploring Hispanic Nationalism in the United States. I conducted this research in the Department of History, Politics, and International Studies, and I was advised by Dr. McLennan. This research is a continuation of my honors thesis that I completed in fall 2020, where I explored the racial roots of nationalism in the US. And in that thesis, I found within my data set a strong minority of Hispanic respondents who felt highly racially resentful or nationalistic. And I measured nationalism in that study using questions about immigration policy. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that in my summer research, and I am excited to share those findings with you today. My research question going into the study was, do Hispanic and Latino individuals in the United States favor the racial exclusion that comes with nationalism to the same degree as their white counterparts? And the reason I thought this was important was the recent rise of nationalism in the US, including ethnocultural nationalism. So going beyond patriotism, pride for one's country, and really making that about a superior ethnicity or race. Often xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiments are really prominent in ethnocultural nationalism. And worth noting is that Donald Trump, a self-proclaimed nationalist leader, received around 30% of Latinos' votes in 2020. And this surprised a lot of political analysts and politicians because this ethnic group is often viewed very monolithically, but in reality, Hispanic people in the US have very diverse political beliefs and cultures based on any number of factors, including national background or region in the US where people are living, just as with any other racial group. Looking at some literature, so specifically about nationalism, it is a belief that the people of a nation should rule or have some power over the way in which the nation behaves. That's what it is at its core. But again, there are different kinds. Civic nationalism is most similar to patriotism, which is kind of that idea of your country is good. It should be a leader in the world. What you see a lot with the American flag being displayed, that would be considered patriotism. Ethnocultural nationalism, again, that's when that substitutes the nation for ethnicity or race being superior. In the US, white nationalism is the most widespread form of ethnocultural nationalism. And again, that is xenophobic. For example, Donald Trump utilized nationalist rhetoric to speak about immigrants and people of color throughout his campaigns and his presidency. Also worth noting, Christian nationalism often coincides with white nationalism in the US in particular. So more literature background, xenophobia, again, key characteristic. And because of geography, Hispanic immigrants often receive the brunt of this discrimination. So in 2018, Pew reported that about 50% of foreign-born individuals in the US came from Mexico or other Latin American countries. And while it is a stereotype that all illegal or unauthorized immigrants in the US are Hispanic, Hispanic people do make up around 50% of the 10.5 million unauthorized immigrants in the US. So because of this, Hispanic people in the United States receive a brunt of the discrimination and xenophobia from white people in the US in particular. So for this reason, it may surprise the average American that around a third of Hispanic and Latino people in the US voted for Trump, as I stated before. But important to note here, some people might have just been voting along party lines. And another thing worth noting, some research has suggested that Latino men in particular are suggested to be more likely to vote Republican than Latino women. Finally, just a couple of statistics from a 2021 study from Krogstad and Lopez. 72% of Latinos in their study found it very or somewhat important that policies are created to make it harder for immigrants to overstay visas. But on the flip side, 83% found it very or somewhat important that there should be a way for illegal immigrants to stay legally. And again, 75% believe that security, the US-Mexico border, should be increased to reduce illegal crossings, but only 45% believe that deportation should increase. So again, no consensus among Hispanic and Latino people in the US. This just once again is hammering down the point that this group should not be treated monolithically as it so often is. So diving into my methods, I utilized the Pew Research Center's 2018 National Survey of Latinos. This is a nationally representative sample of about 1,500 self-identified Latinos ages 18 and older. It was about half men and half women. There were no explicit questions in the questionnaire about nationalism, but as with my thesis, I used questions about immigration policy to gauge the respondents' nationalism because immigration in the US is so often tied to nationalistic feelings and nationalist rhetoric. I also used questions about support of Donald Trump and party affiliation. And then I analyzed these frequencies by demographic variables. I'm only going to go over gender and age today, but I will be happy to answer any questions about the other demographic variables. My overall results, 20.3% of participants, not by divided out by age or anything like that, favored expanding the wall along the US-Mexico border. 26% believe that there are too many immigrants in the US. 23% approved of Trump's job as president. And 52% believe that it has become more difficult as a Hispanic or Latino person to live in the US after Trump. 42% said there was no change and 2% said it has become easier. However, out of those respondents who indicated that they supported or approved of Trump's job as president, only 20% said that it has become more difficult to be a Hispanic or Latino person in the US. So by gender, Hispanic men were about 10% more likely than women to identify as Republican or leaning Republican. Men were also about 10% more likely than women to favor building the wall along the US-Mexico border. And men were more likely to support Trump than women. Women were more likely to say that it had become harder to be Hispanic or Latino in the US, and that they had serious concerns about their place in America after Trump. By age, the most significant difference was which groups had more individuals with serious concerns about their place in America after Trump. So you can see about a little over a third of the 65 plus age group said that they had serious concerns, but around half of each of the other age groups said that they had concerns. So this supports previous research's idea that there might be a higher likelihood of feeling nationalistic or being xenophobic or anti-immigrant if the individual is older or identifies as a man. So for this study, my hypothesis was supported. A strong minority of Hispanic individuals did favor racial exclusion in the form of anti-immigrant policies. The Pew dataset did not reveal the underlying causes of heightened nationalistic feelings within this group, however, so I'll talk a little bit more about further research in that vein later. So also worth noting, white people in the US still have a higher likelihood of feeling nationalistic, racially resentful, etc. For example, 92% of white Republicans approved of Donald Trump's job as president in 2019, according to one study, while in 2018, in this study, only 61% of Hispanic Republicans approved of his job. And given that 69, almost 70% of Hispanic Republicans also favored granting permanent legal status to children who came to the US illegally, and that this policy was something that the Trump administration did not favor, these differences in immigration policy opinions compared to other Republicans may be able to explain that gap in Hispanic Republicans' support of Donald Trump. So overall, a higher percentage of Hispanic individuals in the US still lean liberal rather than conservative in their viewpoints. This is not by any means the majority of Hispanic respondents in this survey, but it is interesting to take note that there is a strong minority who do feel nationalistic and anti-immigrant. Further research, so what feelings lead Hispanic individuals in the US to take anti-immigrant policy stances? Is civic nationalism more widespread than ethnocultural nationalism or vice versa? And do people of color, including Hispanic people in the US, feel similarly xenophobic as white people, or do these anti-immigrant feelings arise from another root emotion? Again, my data set could not answer these questions, but I think they would be interesting to look into in the future. That's all I have today. So feel free to reach out with any questions, and thank you for your time.